Hello, guys. I'm back. Today I have a very, unique surprise for you, and here it is. It's a 2011 Revenge of the Jedi um, Princess Leia in slave outfit. Um, and it did not come out in the 80s. This came out back in the 90s, was its first release. Now, I'll explain why I picked it up. As you can see, I picked this figure up mostly because I just thought it was a cool figure. I think the treatment was done very right to this as I was looking for it online on eBay. And I had one. I had this one from the 90s. And it was a cool figure. Now, being a collector now and knowing that, with all the technology we have and, making toys is just so much easier probably than it was back in the 80s. I mean, we could pretty much now make every Star Wars character you can possibly imagine. But for a collector terms, it kind of loses interest. And I could see where they're coming from. And, in my book, I feel like there are those figures out there that weren't released when they first came out, but they released them, but deserve to be picked up because they kind of stood out in the film itself. And the Princess Leia in slave outfit definitely did. I mean, you got to see Princess Leia in a midriff, and I've heard this on numerous websites, shows, and things about the 80s and Star Wars fans. Like, it was a big thing in 1983, going to a PG film and seeing Carrie Fisher in a midriff. It was just like, whoa. They obviously didn't make an action figure for it in the 80s. I guess moms would be mad about it or whatnot, or I don't know, parents altogether. But it's really cool. It's a really cool figure. Now, going back to, many characters. I'm a Power of the Force 2 guy. I grew up in that generation. So when Star Wars was around for me, it was the time when they were making pretty much every figure. And there's just times where you just didn't need every single one because most of them were on the screen for 2 seconds, or, no one really would remember. There weren't like a Yak face from the 80s or a skiff guard because you kind of needed those figures to fill up the line. But some of these guys that they came out with were so random and were on the screen for like 2 or 3 seconds. Um, and, you know, and to a collector, not really to a child, it's just overwhelming. Um, and then with the prequels, which I'm actually finishing off right now, I could see where it got overwhelming and where it lost interest in, a bunch of people, and especially collectors and in value, was that they made so many variations of one particular character, but at the same time came out with hundreds of characters, and it was just so overwhelming. Now it's not really that overwhelming because they're so cheap and there's so much of them. You don't have to worry about one going up in value as much. But going back to this, you'd be surprised. This was $30, a $30 figure. I actually had a bid on her on eBay. The bid started at like $10. It went up to like almost 30. I maybe 28. Yeah, 28. But still, it's near $30. But you can see why the packaging is awesome. It's on that Revenge of the Jedi packaging. Um, and the cape is cloth, so it has a even more vintage feel to it. It tells a little bit story. It shows the power of the Force One and some of the figures that were available at the time back in 2011. But I gotta say, this is an awesome treatment. It just, I could see why it's being chased after, especially in this line. I think they did it right. And I think this is what collectors are kind of looking for, is this vintage throwback from the 80s when Star Wars was really in its peak. Because being in the 90s growing up, I loved Star Wars. I had Power of the Force 2. I had Episode 1. I was one of those kids. and had a little bit of episode 2 and then stopped. I just stopped around episode 2 and I did other things than that. But they were fun toys. But now being a collector and trying to collect it, it's a lot. A lot of people think the vintage stuff from the 70s and 80s is hard. It's hard in the aspect that condition, because this stuff is almost 30 plus years old, especially Return of the Jedi. The one that we're waiting for now is Power of the Force, but it's condition mostly. A lot of it is around. It's just condition, but it's worth it. Going through it all, because a lot of the stuff from the 70s and 80s was groundbreaking toys and a big change in the industrial toy world. No one had probably seen any toys like Star Wars before. I mean, it was ahead of its time. But now it's the 90s, and we had seen a lot of toys at that point. So as I remember in the 90s, Legos was a big thing. Connects, and action figure wise, I think Batman was really popular, and Street Shark. Star Wars was popular, but I don't think it was as popular as it was in the 80s, where it really dominated the toy market. Along with G.I. Joe and all that. I mean, those were the top two. By the 90s, you had hundreds of toy lines that people that were popular. So it wasn't like Star Wars was like the top two or something. I mean, Star Wars was like an option in the 90s like anything else, and it is now. But I feel like pieces like this, they get chased after. Other things on the card, now going back to the card, it has a limited Boba Fett sticker. This is just a photo. This was never on a vintage card back. So this is a nice photo of it. It has a vintage feel to it. And yeah, we'll unpackage her in the next video. Also, I noticed that with the Boba Fett sticker, it comes with some sort of coupon you can mail on. Other things. Picture on the 90s card was obviously different. I couldn't describe it on here, but as you can see, it was very different. But overall, I think something like this is worth picking up. It's one of those figures that, may have not been in the original toy line from the 70s or the 80s, but it's an important piece, and I think anyone should pick this one up, who wants to put it next to a vintage Return of the Jedi collection or whatnot. And anyways, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 2 of this video.